Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook, cover to cover. This is a textbook copyright in 2001. Here we are on Chapter 19, Section 2, Pivotal. Pivotal. French Revolution, yesterday storming the Bastille? Check it out. Storming the Bastille. Today, Section 2, Chapter 19, Creating a New France. Creating a New France. Setting the scene. Excitement, wonder, and fear engulfed the French as the revolution unfolded at home and spread abroad. Today, historians divided this revolutionary era into 4 phases. The moderate phase of the National Assembly, 1789 to 1791, turned France into the constitutional monarchy. Then a phase, 1792 to 1793, of escalating violence led to a reign of terror, 1793 to 1794. There followed a period of reaction against extremism known as the Directory, 1795 to 1799. Finally, the Age of Napoleon, 1799 to 1815, consolidated many revolutionary changes. In this section, you will read about the moderate start of the French Revolution. That was a little bit of a clunky read, wasn't it? Well, part of the reason why I'm reading this book is to get better at reading. And I am. Trust me. Please? Here we go. Please like and subscribe. Revolts in Paris and provinces. The political crisis of 1789 coincided with the worst famine in memory. Starving peasants roamed the countryside and flocked to the towns, where they swelled the ranks of unemployment. As grain prices soared, even people with jobs had to spend up to 80% of their income on bread. French bread, though. The great fear. In such desperate times, rumors ran wild, set off what was later called the Great Fear. Tales of attacks on villages and towns spread panic. Other rumors asserted government troops were seizing peasant crops. Inflamed by famine and fear, peasants unleashed their fury on nobles, who were trying to reimpose medieval dues. Defiant peasants attacked the homes of nobles, set fire to old manor records, and stole grain from storehouses. The violent attacks died down after a period of time, but they clearly demonstrated peasants' anger with an unjust regime. Paris in arms. Paris, too, was in turmoil. As the capital and chief city of France, it was the revolutionary center. A variety of factions, or small groups, competed to gain power. Moderates looked to Marquis de Lafayette, the aristocrat, hero of 2 worlds who had fought alongside George Washington in the American Revolution. Lafayette. That's why we see Lafayette everywhere in the United States. Interesting. Lafayette headed the National Guard, a largely middle-class militia. That's why we see Lafayette in the United States everywhere. Marquis de Lafayette. Huh. Would you look at that? Lafayette headed the National Guard, a largely middle-class militia organized in response to the arrival of royal troops in Paris. The Guard was the first group to don the tricolor red, white, and blue badge that was eventually adopted as the French national flag? Wait a minute. Are you telling me that the American flag was red, white, and blue before France? I thought it was the other way around. How strange. A more radical group, the Paris Commune, replaced the royalist government in the city. It could mobilize whole neighborhoods for protests or violent actions to further the revolution. Newspapers and political clubs, many even more radical than the Commune, blossomed everywhere. Some demanded an end to the monarchy and spread scandalous stories about the royal family and members of court. Moderate reforms. New heading. Moderate reforms. Peasant uprising and the storming of the Bastille stampeded the National Assembly into action. On August 4th, in a combative all-night meeting, nobles in the National Assembly voted to end their privileges. They agreed to give up their old manorial dues, exclusive hunting rights, special legal status, and an exemption from taxes. Some really bizarre laws that they had in place that you can see here in yesterday's video. The end of special privileges. Feudalism is abolished, announced the proud and weary delegates at 2 a.m. As the president of the assembly later observed, "We may view this moment as the dawn of a new revolution, when all the burdens weighing on the people were abolished, and France was truly reborn." Were the votes on the night of August 4th voluntary? Both contemporary observers and modern historians note that nobles gave up nothing that they had not already lost. In the months ahead, the National Assembly turned the reforms of August 4th into law, meeting a key Enlightenment goal, that equality of all citizens before the law. Declaration of Rights of Men. In the late August, as the first step toward writing the Constitution, the Assembly issued the Declaration of Rights of Men and the Citizens. The document was modeled in part on the American Declaration of Independence, written 13 years earlier. All men, the French Declaration announced, were born and remain free and equal in rights. They enjoyed natural rights to liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Like the writings of John Locke, and the philosophers, the Constitution insisted that governments exist to protect the natural rights of citizens. The Declaration further proclaimed that all male citizens were equal before the law. Every Frenchman had an equal right to hold public office, with no distinction other than that their virtues and talents are worthy. In addition, the Declaration asserted freedom in religion and called the taxes to be levied according to ability to pay. Its principles were captured in the enduring slogan of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Uncertain, the hesitant Louis XVI was slow to accept the reforms of the National Assembly. Parisians grew suspicious as more royal troops arrived. Nobles continued to enjoy gala boutiques while people were starving. By autumn, anger again turned to action. Women march on Versailles. On October 5th, thousands of women streamed down the road that led from Paris to Versailles. "Bread!" they shouted. They demanded to see the king. Much of the crowd's anger was directed at the Queen, Marie Antoinette. Ever since she had married Louis in 1770, she had come under attack for being frivolous and extravagant. She eventually grew more serious and even advised the king to compromise with moderate reformers. Still, she remained a source of scandal. Early in the revolution, the radical press spread the story that she had answered cries of hungry people for bread by saying, "Let them eat cake." Though the story was untrue, it helped to inflame feelings against the queen. How do you know it was untrue? It might have been true. You weren't there. The women refused to leave Versailles until the king met their most important demand: to return to Paris. Not too happily, the king agreed. The next morning, the crowd and the king went in tow, set out for the city. At the head of the procession rode women perched on the barrels of seized cannons. How strange. They told bewildered spectators that they were bringing Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and their son back to Paris. "Now we won't have to go so far when we want to see our king," they sung. Crowds along the way cheered the king, who now wore the tricolor, red, white, and blue of the France flag, which the French flag, the red, white, and blue flag, came after the American flag, red, white, and blue. In Paris, the royal family moved to Tuileries Palace for the next 3 years. Louis was a virtual prisoner. He was basically a prisoner, the man was. The National Assembly presses onward. New heading. The National Assembly soon followed the king to Paris. Its largely bourgeoisie members worked to draft a constitution and to solve the continuing financial crisis, to pay off a huge government debt, much of it owed by the bourgeoisie. The assembly voted to take over and sell church lands, reorganizing the church. In an even more radical move, the National Assembly put the French Catholic Church under state control. Under the civil constitution of the clergy, issued in 1790, bishops and priests became elected, salaried officials. The civil constitution ended papal authority over the French church and dissolved convents and monasteries. Reaction was swift and angry. Many bishops and priests refused to accept the civil constitution. The Pope condemned it. Large numbers of the French peasants who were conservative concerning religion were also rejected. They also rejected the changes. Yeah. My reading needs to develop, and it is. Watch the first episode. Okay. Thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying. I hope that this is passively an educational thing for you, as it is for me. Well, it's active for me, but... When the government punished clergy who refused to support the civil constitution, a huge gulf opened between revolutionaries in Paris and the peasantry in the provinces. Constitution of 1791. The National Assembly completed its main task by producing a constitution. The Constitution of 1791 set up a limited monarchy in place of the absolute monarchy that had ruled France for centuries. A new legislative assembly had taken the power to make laws, collect taxes, and decide on issues of war and peace. Lawmakers would be elected by tax-paying male citizens. Still, only 50,000 men in a population of more than 27 million could qualify as candidates to run in the assembly. To make government more efficient, the Constitution replaced the old provinces with 83. Trying to make the algorithm make this the thumbnail, so 83 departments of roughly equal size. It abolished the old provincial court, and it reformed laws. The middle-class framers of the Constitution protected private property, supported free trade, and compensated nobles for land seized by the peasants. Abolished guilds, forbade urban workers to organize labor unions. To moderate reforms, the Constitution of 1791 seemed to complete the revolution. Reflecting Enlightenment goals, it ended church interference in government and ensured equality before the law for all male citizens. At the same time, it put power in the hands of men with the means and leisure to serve in government. Louis's failed flight. Meanwhile, Marie Antoinette and others had been urging the king to escape their humiliating situation. Louis finally gave in. One night in June 1791, a coach rolled north from Paris toward the border. Inside sat the king disguised as a servant, the queen dressed as a governess, and the royal children. The attempt escape failed. In a town along the way, Louis's disguise was uncovered by someone who held up a piece of currency with the king's face on it. A company of soldiers escorted the royal family back to Paris, as onlooking crowds hurled insults at the king. To many, Louis's dash to the border showed that he was a traitor to the revolution. Reactions outside of France. New heading. Events in France stirred debate all over Europe. Supporters of the Enlightenment applauded the reforms of the National Assembly. They saw the French experiment as the dawn of a new age for justice and equality. European rulers and nobles, however, denounced the French Revolution. Widespread fears. European rulers increased border patrols to stop the spread of the French plague. Fueling those fears were the horror stories that were told by the émigrés. E with an accent, E-M-I-G-R-E with an accent S. Émigrés. Nobles, clergy, and others who had fled France, and the revolutionary forces. Émigrés reported attacks on their privileges, their property, their religion, and even their lives. Enlightened rulers turned against French ideas. Catherine the Great of Russia burned Voltaire's letters and locked up her critics. In Britain, Edmund Burke, who earlier had defended the American Revolution, bitterly condemned revolutionaries in Paris. He predicted all too accurately that the revolution would become more violent. Plots and assassinations, he wrote, will be anticipated by preventative murder of preventative confiscation. Let me read that again. Plots and assassinations, he wrote, will be anticipated by preventative murder and preventative confiscation. Burke warned, when ancient opinions and rules of life are taken away, we have no compass to govern us. Threats from the abroad. The failed escape of Louis XVI brought further hostile rumblings from abroad. In August 1791, the King of Prussia, and no, not King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, the King of Prussia and the Emperor of Austria, who was Marie Antoinette's brother, issued a declaration of Pilnitz, Pilnitz. In this document, the two monarchs threatened to intervene to protect the French monarchy. The declaration may have been mostly bluff, but revolutionaries in France took the threat seriously and prepared for war. The revolution was set to enter a new, more radical phase of change and conflict. And now for the final heading of the section here. Thank you for listening. I hope that you can leave a like and a subscribe if you've made it this far. Thank you. War at home and abroad. War at home and abroad. War at home and abroad. In October 1791, the newly elected Legislative Assembly took office. Faced with crisis at home and abroad, it would survive for less than a year. Economic problems fed renewal turmoil. Assignats, the revolutionary currency, dropped in value, which caused prices to rise rapidly. Uncertainty about prices led to hoarding and additional food shortages. Internal divisions. In Paris and other cities, working-class men and women called sans-culottes pushed the revolutionaries into more radical action. By 1791, sans-culottes demanded a republic or government ruled by a monarch, but not by elected representatives. Within the Legislative Assembly, several hostile fractions competed for power. The sans-culottes found support among radicals in the Legislative Assembly, especially the Jacobins. A revolutionary political club, the Jacobins were mostly middle-class lawyers and intellectuals. They used pamphleteers and sympathetic newspaper editors to advance the Republican cause. Opposing the radicals were moderate reformers and political officials who wanted no more reform at all. War on tyranny. The radicals soon held the upper hand in the Legislative Assembly. In April 1792, the war of words between French revolutionaries and European monarchs moved into the battlefield. Eager to spread the revolution and destroy tyranny abroad, the Legislative Assembly declared the first war on Austria, then on Prussia, Britain, and other states. The great powers expected to win as an easy victory against France, a land divided by revolution. In fact, however, the fighting that began in 1792 lasted till 1815. I hope you have a good day. God bless. Goodbye.